This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good afternoon. This is JoAnn Forrester, known as the Empress of Biz, who is doing Let's Talk Business with one of her favorite people, Sal Acosta. I call him the Duke of Business. And we like to talk to people. And today we have someone from Washington, D.C., Taylor Johnson, who is a independent real estate owner of Keller Williams Capital Properties. Welcome, Taylor, to Let's Talk Business.
Thank you very much, JoAnn. Hello, Sal.
Hi there, Taylor. JoAnn.
You're in an interesting area. You're in Washington, D.C. What geographic area do you cover there?
Right. So Washington is a pretty big space. You know, we've got the District of Columbia. That's, I don't know how many square miles that is. And then Maryland on the east and south of that, and Virginia to the west of it. Currently, I am licensed in Maryland and DC. My Virginia license is hopefully coming next week. So then I'll be able to cover the other side of the river as well.
So you're like within 50 miles, that you operate within 50 miles of the capital?
You're right. That would be a good way to put it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've been to DC a number of times.
Question on that before we kind of get too deep into the real estate part, although this is real estate related. I was reading in the news recently that DC is obviously not a state, but they're trying to become a state. I think that's fair. And
the House voted for the first time ever. Yeah.
So if it did become a state, do you see that affecting real estate prices one way or the other, or is it a total non-issue, or how would that affect real estate?
That's a good question. I don't think really it would affect prices that much. What it would affect is the district's ability to govern itself, and then in that sense to be more responsive to its residents. So right now, the district has kind of limited home rule, which it's only had since the 1970s or something. Before that, it was completely governed by Congress. So in theory, most of what the district decides to do has to be approved by Congress. And there have been multiple times in the 25 plus years that I've been living here where the city council has passed a law to, a spending funding law, and Congress has canceled it. So it's been kind of frustrating for the residents of the city that their government cannot respond to their needs because Congress has this chokehold on them.
That is interesting. And you were an educator before you became a real estate agent, correct? An owner of your own real estate?
That's right. I taught European history and government and economics for 30 years.
Well, I've got to ask the question because I've been an entrepreneur since I was 5. What's the big difference for you for being an educator versus owning your own business?
Oh, it's huge. Right? It's like everything's different. So as an educator, particularly, I knew that I had to start the year on a certain date and end on a certain date. And I knew when my vacations were, and I could not really take any vacations in between. I also knew that I had to start the curriculum at a certain point, the end of the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, and by June I had to reach World War I or World War II, depending on which class I was teaching. Right? So when I was doing and what I was doing and where I was doing, and even to the point where, at 10:10, kids come into the room and I teach them for an hour and then they leave. It's like, I don't know who's coming into the room. I just, like, whoever shows up, But in real estate, it's completely different. Any entrepreneurial business, it's all me and what I do and what I coordinate, and my timetable is up to me, and when I get up and what I do and how much I work, and my results really show that based on how much work I'm putting in. So,
Taylor, let me ask you a question, because maybe piggyback a little bit on that a little bit. So you were a teacher for 30 years in a very, sort of a structured work process, let's call it. And I'm assuming after 30 years, it was a retirement. And you could have done, I'm thinking, a range of things, understanding that maybe you wanted to leverage some of the soft skills you have developed, and so on and so forth. But how did you go from thinking, okay, I've got these skills, these experiences, and I know you traveled a lot, which I know we want to talk about too. So you have also this sort of international exposure, international business. So how do you sort of funnel down and narrow all the possible things that you could do to end up with real estate?
that's a fair question. Well, so after teaching for 30 years, I gave myself a sabbatical of like 5 months. And I just took time to kind of think and do a lot of processing and figuring out what I wanted to do. I was too young to actually take any retirement at 55. So, I was like, well, I've got another 5, 10, 15 years before I retire. What do I want to do? I want to do something that this is my opportunity to really do a job that I want to do, my ideal job. And, do I want to go back into teaching, some other variety of teaching, or do something completely different? I did, over the years, I've done a lot of renovation. I've done a lot of construction. I have had a landscaping business on the side, and I'm pretty good with interior design as well. And I love people, and I love kind of setting my own timetable. So I decided that I didn't want to go back into having that structured business of schooling, and I wanted to kind of combine all those skills together. I still spend a lot of time educating my clients. I still have I used to put together projects where I'd have a step-by-step thing for the kids, breaking out the big picture into multiple steps that they had to achieve. I'm still doing the same thing with my clients. Here's how you buy a house, right? Or here's how we sell a house. Here are the different steps to reach our goal. So it's a lot of the same skills applied in a different way. And I'm really helping other people achieve their dreams in a more noticeable, tangible way, I think, than as a teacher. As a teacher, a lot of the reward you get is delayed. A student comes to you 5 years later and says, Mr. Johnson, I loved your course and I'm doing blah, 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 blah now because of what you taught me. It's like, great. I didn't know that when I taught you, But as a real estate agent, I just had a closing this week, and my client said, I wouldn't have had this house without you. You were so patient, and you were so helpful, and you really guided me through all the different pieces, and I'm in my forever home because of you. It's like, man, that's really powerful.
Have you had many of your students as clients?
I have a couple, yes. Yeah, that's good.
Now, let me ask you a question. So you also, beyond being a realtor and helping other people buy and sell properties, businesses, that's what I do. You said you also renovate. So do you like buy to renovate and flip? Do you, in some cases, keep them and rent them? How does that sort of personal business of yours work? How does that part work?
So far, I'm doing it to keep it for myself. So I have 2 other properties that, plus the house that I live in. The one you see behind me is 100 years old. and it always needs work. So I redid the bathroom in here, I redid the shingling, I did a new roof, I did a whole bunch of landscaping at this house. My house in Landover, I did a whole bunch of new drywall and new tile work. I have a house in Baltimore where I'm replacing the bathroom and the kitchen with the intention then of renting that out. And the house in Landover I'm renting out as well. I also have a handful of clients who are renovators and flippers that I've been working with. So I go in and I help them. I mean, they're renovators; they know what to do too. But we can kind of confer, like, oh yeah, you really need to tear this out and redo this, or we could save that, or whatever. And here's your potential market value after we do that. Is it going to make sense to go ahead and buy this house now, do the renovation, and then I help them sell it?
With this, I've been in real estate and development with we're no longer in it, but with my previous partners, it was an adventure. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
You never know what's going to happen when you open up a wall. What's behind there? You know?
That's true. Sometimes you find some really cool things.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I opened up a wall in the house here and I found a little box inset into the wall, a paneled box. I'm like, what is that for? I couldn't figure it out. So I covered it up again.
You are in the Washington D.C. Metropolitan market. How is housing moving right now? What's happening during this COVID situation?
Well, we have not really seen. It certainly hasn't stopped. During the first month of shutdown, we shut down, I think, second, maybe third week of March.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, things slowed down. Buyers kind of, particularly, we couldn't do open houses and stuff. So people are just coming to have a look. Totally dropped out. But houses were still selling. I follow an area that's about 10 miles, no, about 3 miles long and a mile wide, following along Rhode Island Avenue corridor into the city. And we've had probably 24 new listings every week, 24 to 30 sales every week.
Wow.
Until we got into May, and then it bumped up to 35 to 40 every week for those numbers. So, the houses are still selling, buyers are still buying. What I found as a realtor was those who were looking to buy were really serious, and they, people were actually buying houses without seeing them based on virtual visits to the house, or I would go and visit the house and do a video tour of the house and share that video with the client, or have them on like a video chat like we're doing now while I'm in the house, and I could answer questions live. And then they'd put in an offer, but we would write into the offer that they have a 2-day contingency after acceptance to go and see the house themselves. So that way, they could be safe. They could reduce their risks. They don't have to look at every house in the world. They're only looking at that one house. Interestingly, what we've also found is that houses put on the market still are selling really quickly. Like the average days on market in the area that I follow has decreased. It's gone down from 20 days to 4 last week.
Wow.
So that means the homes are selling in 2, 3, 4 days. Crazy. They're just, the inventory is so tight. Nationwide, the inventory is really tight. In Maryland, there are 10,000 fewer homes actively on the market this year than there were last year.
Now, let me ask you this question. Because of the coronavirus, and we're still kind of in that period where it's not 100% clear what's going to happen, but
Right.
certainly we've already seen a lot of unemployment, and as the PPP kind of finishes off and whatever, whether there's a second stimulus or not, but whatever. But there's going to be a lot of employment, no matter how you slice it. Do you see that in the future affecting the days on market, affecting price, and if so, and maybe what levels of real estate too? Because I know obviously that if you're talking the super high end, those people have money no matter what.
To some extent, yeah. I think we're going to see a couple of things. We're going to see commercial real estate hit pretty hard, right? That offices and restaurants and shops and stuff like that are not going to make it, and that's going to have a really difficult period of adjustment for any commercial real estate. And I say that because a lot of commercial real estate, particularly in DC, is owned by small owners. It's not big corporations, but it's one man who owns a little building and rents it out or something like that. So those folks are going to be hit pretty hard. Then the ripple effect of that, of course, is all those businesses and their workers and all that sort of stuff, and the owners of those buildings. And right now, too, we're under rent for forbearance and eviction moratoriums. So, if you have clients or tenants who aren't paying, but you still have to pay your mortgage, that's going to be a real problem. So my prediction is that in the next few months, we will see a lot more places come on the market for sale as people try to avoid foreclosure or move to new jobs or something like that. And that could potentially have a downward pressure on prices, though I'm surprised that the demand has not gone down more than it did. So the demand is still high enough that it's holding prices up. And the inventory is so short that I think more houses on the market is really not going to have a big depression of prices. Might have a little, but I don't think it's going to be a lot.
Why is the inventory so short?
That's a good question that I don't think anybody knows. It has, over the last 4 years, has been declining in terms of numbers of homes for sale. And it's interesting because, interest rates have been low. So there's lots of incentive for people to buy a bigger house. But the mentality right now is to stay in your city, to stay in a place you can walk. A lot of people like where they are. They don't want to leave. So maybe they're using those low rates to get a home equity line and add on to the house or renovate it and make it, more like the house they want rather than buying a different house.
Yeah. I noticed one of the things that in my looking at your website, you take a portion of your commission and donate it to a charity of your client's choice. That's unusual.
Well, yeah, I think that's really important that, I'm successful in this business because people are helping me. So I try to help people out.
And you've traveled a great deal. Like I saw 40 countries.
Yes, I think it's up to 44 now.
Wow.
So is there like a master plan behind that to hit a certain list, or you just do them as they come? I mean, because 44 is a lot, so I'm thinking maybe there's some grand scheme behind it.
No, there's certainly no master plan. If there were, I wouldn't have some holes that I have. For instance, I've been to the Netherlands and to France, but I've never been to Belgium. Right? So if there were the master plan, that would make sense to include that because they're next to each other. So I lived in Switzerland for 4 years, and it was really easy to do a lot of Europe, of course, and I did some bits of Asia and Africa from there as well. So I think that's probably how I got most of my travels during the 4 years that I was in Switzerland. I only came back to the U.S. in the summer for spring break and Christmas break. I would travel, and then I usually traveled a week or two in June at the end of school and a week or two in August before school. So it
Let
made it
me ask you
relatively
this question,
easy.
because this question is obvious, let's say, but of all the countries you've traveled, which one is, if you were going to live there permanently, which one would be your favorite and why?
Oh, I think Italy.
Yeah.
Um, the food in Italy is just, it's like the only place in Italy I've ever had bad food is Venice. And that's because Venice is mostly tourists and the restaurants there don't really have to cater to locals. But if you go to other towns, they've got the restaurants are at least 50% locals. They've got to be good. They buy food that's at the market that day. You know, it's real fresh. The menu changes daily according to what's available. Um, the climate is very, very temperate. The landscape is beautiful. The history, you know, as a teacher of European history, I mean, that's where it all happened, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the art history. I'll tell you, when I studied history, we did some art history, of course, in classes, and I didn't really get it. I was like, well, so what, you know? And then I went to Florence, and I walked into the academia, and I saw the David, Michelangelo's David, like
Oh,
right
wow.
there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I get it. I mean, this giant stone statue looked like it was going to step off the pedestal and walk across the room. Like, how exciting that must have been for people when all the art before that didn't look anything like that. So that kind of invigorated my love of art history, and I started incorporating a lot of it into my classes till probably my students got sick and tired of art history. But um, I mean, it's an important part, you know. And I still hear from students who go to the National Gallery or they go to some museum somewhere and they go, Mr. Johnson, I remember you talking about this painting, and now I just saw it. It's like, oh, it's so cool. It's like, okay, great.
Oh,
Somebody was paying attention. That's great.
I can understand that. I'm a history buff. I love digging into history, and well, I'm very much into women's history, which is
Okay.
sadly neglected.
Yeah.
So,
Do you
um,
have a time period that you prefer?
beg pardon?
Do you have a time period that you prefer?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm into the time period from the Seneca Falls Convention to the 1920 to when the 19th Amendment was passed.
What
And
an interesting
that time
time.
period was so tumultuous. It included the Civil War. It included a number of, World War One. Included the Spanish flu, which was so devastating.
Right?
And it. I just am fascinated by the whole period, which really laid the foundation to who we are today.
Yeah. Well, and it also that was the progressive era as well. So you have a whole bunch of grassroots political efforts to change laws that were really unfair. I mean, that's the time that we get the secret ballot, we get direct election of senators, we get states allowing um, I'm having a brain fart. When you can vote directly on a ballot issue.
Oh, yeah, like they do in California all the time, ballot
Yeah,
initiative or something.
yeah, something like that. We didn't have any of that before, right? And that's, of course, the time that women started pressuring for getting votes, and they had a lot of support from the progressives because it just tied in with all that other stuff. And universal male suffrage also comes around at that time. So why not give it to women too?
So let me ask you a quick question, not to derail us too much from business, but
This happens to us.
yeah, and you like this one, JoAnn, because I think this one's up your alley too. And frankly, I haven't heard about this in a few years now. But anyway, the Equal Rights Amendment, is it necessary? Is it unnecessary? What is your opinion on that?
Oh, that was going through all the works and everything when I was in college. And we had Phyllis Schlafly and Alan Alda and others come to my college and speak in favor of the ERA. So I guess I'm pretty well indoctrinated. I remember at the time that the argument was, hey, we don't really need it because there are already laws in place. But the laws are kind of haphazard. And I think the value of an amendment is that it makes it more solid across the board, right? For example, the 14th Amendment has been really important in helping various groups to get their case listened to and pushed forward in the state, because it made it a national thing that no state can go against the laws of a citizen of another state. So this is how we got gay marriage, because folks in Massachusetts were legally married. They moved to Virginia where they were not allowed to be married, and then they challenged it. So I think having an amendment would help in that case, where areas where the laws are less progressive perhaps than others, and women don't have quite the same rights that they would in a different state, would help to equalize everything. And as far as I know, like one state last year just approved it. So maybe I think they're only one state away from having the right number of states, but we're long beyond the set deadline for approval. So I guess that raises a whole nother question. If another state does approve, will that still be valid?
Well, as I understand it, if Virginia has come on and approved it, that gives us our number, but I think it's going to have to either go to the Supreme Court or it's going to have to run again, and that's here we go again.
Right. Right.
Let's get back to.
Well, in terms of business-wise, there's about ENDA, the the Employment Non-Discrimination Act that was going through Congress a number of years ago, was for women and for gays, lesbians, and transgender, and provided protections against discrimination in employment. And this was going to be a national law, so then it would apply to the different states, and it was not approved. But it's a similar thing. It's like, if we don't have a national standard, it's hard to make sure that the different states are compliant. And then as a business, I would, if I were a business operating in all 50 states, I would be pulling out what little hair I have left, because you have 50 different sets of laws. Like, how can you be sure that you're compliant to all of them? Wouldn't it be easier just to have one?
Let me ask you a question, maybe to go back a little bit to the real estate business. A lot of people
We have to talk to
have
her.
a master plan of, hey, I'm going to buy a bunch of properties and rent them out, and then maybe that's my retirement or my business or whatever. So
Bingo.
my question is, understanding that first of all, like everything, there's a lot of nuances in terms of location, the type of property, the cost of renovating, things like that. But in general, when you're thinking of buying a house, let's say a residential house, not to live yourself, but to rent it out, should you be looking at the rent you can get versus the price of that house? Should you be looking at the rent you can get versus maybe your monthly mortgage? And either way, could you give us maybe some rules of thumb in terms of type of return on investment that you could expect, meaning rent versus purchase price, rent compared to mortgage, kind of for people that are thinking of doing that as a business?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important to make sure that whatever property you're buying is cash flow positive. With one exception, and that exception would be if the cash flow is just slightly negative and you anticipate major appreciation. Even with that, you're playing with fire, because what if you don't get that appreciation, right? And so you have to pony up money every year just to keep that property going. But being cash flow positive isn't going to really make you any money. If you're buying in order to, I guess it depends what your goal is. If your goal is long-term income,
Mhm.
you want some appreciation, obviously, but you're not worried about a lot of appreciation. You're just really in it for the cash. And then you got to really make sure that the total revenue received over the year, minus your mortgage, minus your insurance, minus your maintenance, minus your whatever other your costs are, is a positive flow, and it should equal somewhere around 3% or better of your total investment. All right, 3% is kind of like the minimum acceptable rate.
Okay, 3% per year.
Right, after you've deducted all your other expenses. Now, you could accept less than 3% if you're in an area that has shown a regular appreciation rate of, say, like for example, there are parts of DC for the last 10 years have increased 6% a year. Well, you might be okay with 2% cash flow if you're getting a 6% appreciation. That's a total return of 8%. That's pretty good, right?
Right.
So if your long-term goal is cash, that's what you really want to focus on. And you want to make sure that you're, I would say, better than 3%. If you're really looking at the cash, you want like 4 or 5%. If your goal is to hold it maybe 5, 10 years and then sell it, then you're really looking for appreciation, and you're looking for the cash to sort of tide you over until you capitalize on that appreciation. So you could accept a slightly lower rate of return. Again, I would say 3% is kind of the minimum. And then you capitalize on your appreciation and pull out your earnings and buy another property.
Yeah. Yeah, we had been in, our model was 4 units, let one unit be in the state of remodel, and let the other 3 carry everything.
Right.
And then we would move in, and then eventually we would sell it. And that model that worked well, as long as all my workmen would do what I wanted them to do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of I know a lot of young couples who've been trying to work with that model to buy the 4 unit. And the 4 unit is one that you can still buy on a home loan. So if you're going to live in it, you can buy it with an FHA or a conventional home loan and only put 3, 4, 5% down. And, live in 1 unit, rent out the other 3, repair them as they come vacant, and then you've got a nice rental income. If you have more than 4 units, you cannot do that. You have to put 20% down, and that's a bigger hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you ever advise people, because and I'll speak for myself, okay? What I would find challenging about trying to use real estate as a source of generating income and generating wealth, and it has nothing to do with the actual financial numbers, but I know people that is their business. And they have to have a very, I'll say, strong personality, meaning when somebody doesn't pay the rent, they got to kick them out. It can't be any ifs, ands, or buts, or I'll let you catch up, or I'm sorry you lost your work. They have to be, and I don't know if the right word is cold-hearted, objective, hard-nosed, whatever. Pick your word, but they basically, you don't pay your rent,
business.
you're out.
It's a business. You got to run it as a business.
Yeah, run it as and if there's no pets, there's no pets. I mean, not, hey, it's a little dog, it's a fish, whatever. No pets is no pets. And then the other big thing in my book is also, you have to be somewhat handy, because if you're going to pay for everybody to do everything, plumbers, electricians, whatever, then that eats up your profit. So how do you advise people about these things and have these types of conversations? Or if they just come to you and say, hey, I want to buy a property to make some money, you say, okay, good. Here's some I'm going to show you.
Yeah, of course. Often the best teacher is experience, and I've had some bad experiences that have taught me a lot. and I'm happy to share those. It's like, do not do what I did,
Yeah.
So, again, I think it depends partly on your objective, and it depends partly on your personality, right? I have a young client. He and his wife are really determined in the next 15 years they're going to be living off their rental income. And they buy a house and they fix it up while they're living in it, and then they rent it out and buy another house. And they've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. So they have a nice little portfolio of homes, and he manages it all himself, and he's willing to do that. I've learned that I'm a little too nice, and I hire a property manager because people come at me with their sob stories, and I cave. So, like, I hire somebody to be the heavy instead of me. And that way too, somebody else gets the call at midnight, not me, right?
Taking a look at the DC market, and everything's stable. And what I hear you saying is the commercial property is going to take a hit.
I feel that.
Yeah. I think it's all going to bounce back, but I think the next 5, 6. Remember, I said a recession was coming. Sal, it's going to be it's going to be a bumpy ride, but I also see some innovations coming. If we're talking 5 years from now, what do you say will have happened?
Well, I think residential is going to recover before commercial, personally. I don't really have any expert advice that I'm basing that on. That's just my personal observation. You know, the DC area is slightly insulated from other things because of all the government stuff that's happened around here and the international organizations that are based here and all that kind of stuff, right? So even in 2008, when the whole country just went whoomp, right? DC did not decline nearly as much, and it had recovered back to full price and above in 2 years.
Wow.
Now, outside of DC took longer. I'm only where I live is 2 miles outside the border of the district. It took 10 years here to recover, but the city only took 2. But you know, even the 10 years here is less than, I don't know that Las Vegas is still recovered, right? I mean, there are parts of the country that are still below market from where they were in 2008.
Yeah. So what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, there's email, gtaylorsellshomes@gmail.com.
Repeat that again, slower.
gtaylorsellshomes@gmail.com. Or my phone number is 202-763-2483.
Yeah. Sal, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm going to start with the phone. Feel free to call me, area code 484-358-9470.
Sal,
Again,
say that slower.
I'm sorry?
Say that slower.
Slower, 484-358-9470.
You know what I do is I picture myself writing it while I'm saying it, so that the person listening has time to write it.
No. But let me say this. Don't worry about it, because in the description to the video, we're actually going to put all this information. So if you're listening to this and you're worried that you don't have time to write it, don't worry about it. Just click on the description to the video. Yeah. But the other thing that the email, just for the record, again, it'll be in the description of the video, Sal, SAL 459@yahoo.com.
And you can contact me, the Empress of Biz, JoAnn Forrester, cell phone number 412-670-4322, landline 412-440-6969, and the email is Empress, EMPRESS of OFBiz, BIZ, @gmail.com.
Well, you still have a landline, huh?
Pardon me?
You still have a landline.
Yeah. Oh, boy, yeah. I believe in them. My son is a police officer, a police detective, and he says, Mom, what can go wrong will go wrong. Have 2 means of communication.
I agree with that. And, you know, we had a storm one day and all the power went out, and the cell phones weren't working.
Yep.
And the portable landline was not working, but the one plugged into the wall was working. Yep. So I keep one of those too.
Yeah. I've gotten caught in blizzards where my cell phone was out. I mean, you name it, everything else was up, but my landline was working. I believe in that. To wrap up, I would like to ask each one of you, and I would like to start with you, Taylor. What is your business tip for those who are thinking of going into business? Now, you've gone from educator to real estate, so you have an interesting background. What would you like to share with people?
Specifically into real estate or just into business?
Just in business.
Okay. I think have a game plan. right? To kind of figure out what it is. Well, maybe more importantly, have a why. Why is it that you're doing it? You have a goal, you have an objective, but why? Because there are going to be days when you don't really want to do all the crappy stuff you have to do in order to make the business work. So what's going to get you through those days is your why, your reason, right? Your big push. Um, and then you can start figuring out a game plan. What we do in real estate is we kind of figure out our big goal, what is our objective for the year, and then we break that down into number of sales and break that down into number of appointments and so on and so forth, so that we can kind of keep track of numbers. And so I guess that would be the next thing I would say is figure out some system to track your numbers, because if you don't have your numbers, you don't know where you're going or what you need to do to improve.
Yeah. Sal, what's your tip?
My tip, and it's actually related to what Taylor said, but a slightly different spin, is to do some when you're thinking of going into business or what business and staying in business, do some very honest introspection to try to figure out what business fits your personality, your lifestyle. Because, I'm a firm believer there's a business out there for everybody, but you have to have a good match again between your risk tolerance, your capital, your personality, your temperament. Okay, I'll be the first one to say, me personally, and some people have been extremely successful with this, I would be a terrible landlord in spite of maybe getting, a property administrator or whatever the case may be. People would figure out if they can get a hold of me, I'm going to give them a pass. I would be terrible at it. And not only that, but don't just think about yourself. Think about your family too, and your lifestyle, because you personally may be okay saying, hey, listen, somebody calls me at 10 p.m. because the toilet is clogged. What the hell? I get in my pickup truck, I go over there and I fix it. But is your wife going to be okay with that? Is your kids going to be okay with that? Is that really, or is that going to cause you problems? And then maybe the last thing I'll say along those lines too is enroll the help of somebody that knows you, that can help you, and that can be honest with you, and bounce some of these ideas and some of these issues and some of the lifestyle things off of them, and have them give you sort of a third party perspective on this, and tell you, hey, listen, if you think you're going to be a landlord, you're crazy. You better go do whatever, or maybe not do it, but just don't do this one.
Sal, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I have used that to figure out my why. What is it that's driving me here? I had some very serious discussions with people who knew me, who helped ask the right questions or get me to ask the right questions of myself, so I could find those answers.
Both of you guys.
Sometimes it's hard to do that yourself, right?
Yeah.
And kind of where I thought you were going with that was to find a mentor to help you with the business, which might be a totally different person. But I think that's also really important, particularly if it's a field that you're kind of new in. Make sure you find somebody who can help you figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. And by the way, not to piggyback on that, but also to maybe give you some insights into things that are not obvious, problems that are not obvious, that again may relate to all these things, and say, hey, listen, I'm in this business or this industry. If you're planning to be in this business or this industry, recognize that maybe you don't know, but A, B, and C are going to happen to you, and you got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Mine, you both stole my things I was going to say.
Ah, shucks.
We'll let you be first next time, JoAnn.
But I will find something to say. So I think one of the things that I do when I work with people who are thinking of going into business is the things that you're used to when you are in a system, they're not going to have. You're not going to have that automatic life insurance, that automatic hospitalization, that disability, and that I really, can you, when you guys were, can you actually stomach going through risk? There was years I didn't have hospitalization. That was a risk. I was fortunate, but if you have a family, that's very risky.
Yeah.
So I make them say, okay, and they look at me and I say, and you have to pay. I teach, so this is you have to pay your own Social Security. Your boss has been paying half of it. The shock on the financial end when
It's
they start to,
huge.
yes, and I will, and I concentrate on that with them because it was one hell of a shock for me. I'll tell you that. And I've been in business over 35 years,
Yeah, that's
and I
something
was
always
5
called
when we
genetic.
started, but but I mean that financial shock is there. And so I tell back off and figure out how you're going to do this, because there's too many people that get out of it when they should have never gotten into it.
Yeah.
But you're not getting me out of it. I love it. So anyway, Sal, do you want to do a wrap up? We've been
Well,
we've been going for quite a while.
yeah, no, this has been actually one of the longer sessions, so that's a reflection, Taylor, on you.
But
This
I have a
interesting
gift of gab, I
conversation.
guess.
So my wrap up is only to say thank you for sharing this time with us and your knowledge and your insight. Same thing for JoAnn. Maybe next time we can do one in Italy. Trust me, I like Italian food
Oh,
too, so you're not going to
yeah.
have to, twist my arm too much on that one. And thank you both.
All right. Thank you both. This has been a really wonderful experience.
Thank you.